Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, and I'm your host, Joe JDF Foster. And today I'm going to be doing my episode on the idea of video games that have been made in movies and which ones I consider good and the ones I consider bad. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because movies like Detective Pikachu and how they seem to keep doing this over time, turning video games into movies, no matter what they look like or how well they do in theaters. And some of them, it's a good thing. Others, it's the worst mistake they can make. And another reason I'm doing this is because soon in the next year, they're supposed to be releasing a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And also, the Mortal Kombat franchise is supposed to be getting a reboot in movies, which I'm actually interested in those two a lot because I actually cared for them. Now, the Detective Pikachu, it's supposed to be getting a sequel as well at some point, but not definitive on when. Anyways, one of the reasons this came to me as important is because video games are something I've enjoyed since I was little, and a lot of the stuff they make in the movies are games that I've either played or I've watched be played or that I've gotten into in some way, whether I liked them or not. And then I'll watch these movies and see what they did and be like, this was actually what they came up with, and be insulted. While there were some, on the other hand, that went the other way and I actually really enjoyed, even if they didn't follow the story that they're based off of. Now, instead of starting with the instead of starting with the good, I'm going to start with the ones that are bad, as I didn't do much looking up on them. To my list too. Number 10 on my list, any movie in the Resident Evil franchise that came after the second one. The first one was really good, even though it didn't follow the storyline exactly, and it took a lot of licenses and freedom with it. It overall had the idea of the story in mind, and Resident Evil 2 did the same thing. But after that, the franchise just severely went downhill and didn't care anymore, it seemed like, and just got more ridiculous as they went on. Number 9, the live-action movies of the Tekken franchise. Now, I'll discuss the animated one that I enjoyed and the good ones, but with Tekken, I loved this video game franchise. I thought it was one of the great ones, along with Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and King of Fighters, Real Bout, or Fatal Fury, however you want to look at it. And I actually enjoyed Tekken on the original PlayStation and the PlayStation 2, and its games evolving over time. But so when they actually said that they were coming out with a movie, I was like, yeah, this should be good. Looking forward to it. Then they did such horrible storytelling with it and changing a lot of things for it. Then they decided they were going to make Tekken 2, Kazuya's Revenge, and another one called Tekken Blood Vengeance. And not one of these movies actually made sense in the way they were done. All they were was just, hey, let's throw a fight in there and call it Tekken and throw in the name of characters while we're at it. No actual story that made sense to the Tekken universe at all. Number 9, Mortal Kombat. Not number 9, number 8. Sorry. Mortal Kombat Annihilation. This was the second movie that they made out of the Mortal Kombat movies. This one was when Lambert and Bridget Wilson didn't come back to reprise their roles as Raiden and Sonya Blade. Now, the problem with this movie is that, in my view, it took the Mortal Kombat movies I saw them as being split into 2 movies. But the problem is that each one took 2 of the games and put them together. The Annihilation, unfortunately, had Mortal Kombat 2 and Mortal Kombat 3 to put together, and unfortunately, Mortal Kombat 3 was not as great as they built it up to be, though it had great characters. But with Annihilation, the story behind it, when you threw it in with 2, was kind of ruined because of how it was done. And then they had bad act. I'm sorry to if the actors actually take offense if they ever saw this, but I thought the acting was horrible. It had a few moments of comedy, and I even made a video of one of my other videos I made. Actually, to the movie was based. I called it Sonya's Strength. There was 2 versions of it where I used Bullet for My Valentine with their version of No Easy Way Out, and also used the original version of No Easy Way Out by Robert Tepper, even though I credited it as Survivor on that, which was my mistake. But when I looked it up, it was listed as Survivor instead of Robert Tepper. But the song was used in Rocky IV soundtrack. But anyways, back to my point. With Annihilation, there was no real story. It was just, let's try and build on the success of the movie that we had before and make up some more. But let's take the second and third game's ideas and throw them in there with the animalities that were poorly done. Motaro, who was very poorly done. Baraka, who had a grand total of, I think it was like 30 seconds at most in screen time, which kind of ruined it for him because I know people who actually looked forward to seeing him in the movies. And an interesting note is that they actually had Baraka they had Tarkatans, the clan that Baraka belongs to appear, originally scheduled to appear in the original Mortal Kombat movie, but they thought it would be too hard to make and too hard to play the role. So instead, they turned them into regular ninja-style fighters. So that's why, and so they put Baraka in this one, and I don't know who did the effect, who did the makeup and stuff for him back then, but they couldn't have done any worse. I mean, even some of the games that came later on had better versions of him, like Armageddon, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which is generally considered to be the worst of the Mortal Kombat franchise games, and it had a better Baraka on it. Number 7, Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li. Now, while this movie wasn't completely bad, it had nothing to do with the actual Street Fighter story, other than the fact that it was Chun-Li trying to get back at Bison for the death of her father. And the movie itself takes characters takes these characters it's created from other characters in the game franchise and changes their stories in order to suit the film. Now, the character like Nash, if you actually saw the movie, Nash was this cop. He wasn't, but if you actually played the games, Nash wasn't a cop. He was a soldier. One who actually worked with Guile. And he had been taken away from him and replaced eventually. But what made this so sad is that the story pretty much focused solely on Chun-Li and had nothing to do with the Street Fighter franchise in any way, really. Other than the fact that it had characters who had the names that from the series. Vega didn't really fight like Vega's character. Balrog didn't really do much, although Michael Clarke Duncan wasn't bad in the role. Number 6, House of the Dead. Or House of Dead, I'm not sure how it actually pronounced it. But it's actually based on a video game, and this one really made no sense because instead of trying to come up with an idea where you do the shooter style for the movie to survive zombies, things like that, this movie's like, hey, let's have a wild party on this island and turn it into a shooting spree in which we all try to survive. There was no actual story. That was the story, pretty much. And they just gave it the name and occasionally threw in some scenes that resembled the video game when you played it from scenes that they would have from it. Number 5, this one's actually a tie because they've recently released a sequel to it, but Doom, which starred Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and its sequel, Doom Annihilation, which can currently be seen at the time of this video on Netflix. These two movies, neither one really tried to focus on the game. They're like, oh, hey, let's just throw something from the game in there and then build a whole new story around it in some way. And it pretty much destroyed it. And the sequel, I thought, hey, maybe it'll be better and they'll give it a chance, just to be fair. I watched that. Within an hour, I was wanting to turn. Within an hour of the movie, and the movie's not even that long in the sequel. It's like an hour and a half long, I think. But by the time the hour mark hit, I was wondering why I hadn't already pushed the button to stop watching it. And this one, as much as I wanted to like it and have hope for it, all that, I had to give it a thumbs down, and I do not recommend it to be watched. But if you like to watch out the movies in their series completely, then, like I said, Netflix has it on there at the time. At the time of this video, and feel free to watch it, but I do warn you it will be a waste of time, just like the original Doom was. Number 4 on my list of bad movies, BloodRayne. This one, I've seen the game played, and I like the way the story went with it. But when I watched the movie, while again, this is another one where the movie wasn't bad completely, but it strayed far enough from the game that how you could actually consider it to be anywhere near it, other than the fact that it used characters' names, as a problem. And another big problem with it is they made so many sequels that they made at least one other sequel. They made at least one sequel to it, I know, and it was really horrible and a complete waste of time also. But now, number 6 on this list, sorry, I kind of wrote these down and tried to recalculate them, and I ended up screwing up. But my next film in line is the Silent Hill Revelations, which is the sequel to the Silent Hill movie they made, where you get Sharon as being older now in this movie, to where she's a teenager, and she goes to the town of Silent Hill and has to deal with the truth and what comes of it. This film, it was just trying to live off what little success the actual Silent Hill movie made. And while, again, you get the return of Pyramid Head and some other characters from the movie, from the first movie and the game, it actually makes no sense. And was a horrible movie overall. Next on my list, Rampage. When this was a video game when I was a kid, I loved it. You got to take control of a gorilla, a wolf, a lizard. And your job was actually to eat people while destroying towns in order to earn points. It was a fun game. This movie they managed to make basically screwed the series up, because what did it do? Oh, we're genetic testing on animals, and they're actually just animals that have a special serum put to them that's causing them to act this way when they hear a certain radio wave frequency that causes it to kick in and drive them nuts. And it was more about corporate greed and business profits rather than the story of trying to come up with an actual story that would deal with the people turning into the monsters and causing this damage somehow. And then you try to turn the characters into heroes, and that ruined it even more. When you try to turn one of the characters who in the game was a nightmare, and you try to turn it into a hero because, oh, it's friends, and turn it into, like, basically they tried to make a buddy film and a romantic meaning somewhat of a romantic comedy out of a story that's based on a game that's all about violence. Next on my list is the live-action version. Wait. Okay, I already did this one, because I was about to say the Tekken and Tekken 2 franchise, but in the Tekken and Tekken 2 live-action movie, I already did that. So I'll move on to my next one, which was my last one on this list of bad movies. Super Mario Brothers. Though it's not the first movie that was actually based on games, a video game franchise, is most often considered to be the first film to be proof of a bad idea to turn a video game into a movie. Because it turns out Japan actually had movies in 1986 where they were exclusively released in Japan based off of other video game franchises. But this movie, the graphics were bad, the story was bad, and I don't know who did the writing, but they really needed help. And it's pretty sad when the actors that were in this movie couldn't save it from being such a horrible train wreck. Okay, now we're going to move on to the movies I considered that, though they're still bad, they were actually the good ones of the video games that were turned into movies. Number 7 on my list, from 2005, Alone in the Dark. The movie talks about how they've opened this gateway to where these aliens are coming, these alien monster-like dogs are coming through and dragging them down. Nightwish had a music video that was set to this. While they already had an album out that had the song on it, the song was called Wish I Had an Angel. They did a remake of the video and threw in clips from the movie and used it. The movie stars Christian Slater, Tara Reid, and Stephen Dorff. For those of you who may not know Stephen Dorff, he's the guy who in the original Blade movie played Deacon Frost. Something I didn't know, the opening text in this movie was added to the movie after they did a test audience, who said they were confused by the plot, which I gotta give them. If you've never heard of Alone in the Dark and just saw this movie, it would be confusing. And even with having played the games, it was still confusing. So I can understand why they would say the opening text would be needed. Also, I enjoyed the movie, though I hadn't personally played the games. Again, it's another one of those where I watched them play and saw the story that was unfolding from it. Which could be the reason why I enjoyed it. It's because I didn't actually play the game. But I watched the game be played instead. And in 2005, when this film came out, it was one of 2 films that CinemaScore gave, that the audience for CinemaScore gave an F to. The other film was Wolf Creek. And something I find interesting is that though Tara Reid and Christian Slater got the lead for this film, the person who was actually in charge wanted Christian Bale and Jessica Alba for the lead roles originally. But some issues came up and it ended up not happening. Also, the soundtrack was paid. A record label called Nuclear Blast paid $30,000 for the soundtrack rights so that they could promote their bands, which means they would have been the ones to be promoting Nightwish at the time. Okay, number 6, the live-action original Silent Hill movie. It features characters from the franchise, even though some of them are just in name that they have these characters in the movie. The nurse. One interesting fact I saw about this is that, because I always wondered how they did with the nurses' movements in this movie, in the original. I found out. They did it by filming the nurses walking back, the people playing the nurses walking backwards, and then ran the film and then ran the film backwards in order to get them to walk like they did. I mean, to get the appearance of them walking like they did, where it was eerie, where it was kind of creepy. The director of this movie spent 5 years trying to get the rights to make the movie from Konami. In the end, what got him the rights granted was that he sent them a film telling him how much Silent Hill meant to him. And also, some films that he spent his own money, I mean, some scenes that he had filmed on his own money that were cut and overlaid with music from the Silent Hill games to show him how much it actually meant to him. Which, as much as I hate to admit it, Konami probably still shouldn't have given him the rights because the movie ended up not being that great. I mean, it was better than a lot of movies, but again, from what I've seen, there are no good movies based on the video games in that aspect when they try to keep true to it, or they try to make a live action version of it. And with some of them, even the animated ones are bad. But anyways, back to my thing here. Silent Hill was another one where I watched my brother play because I'm actually really bad at these games and the Tomb Raider games and games like that. I am really horrible at Zelda games even. But I enjoyed the stories behind, especially in the first one, in the first Silent Hill game. So I decided to give this a chance, and I liked the story that went with this and the darkness of the game, as well as the music that they used in it, which was fitting. Also, according to what I found, minus like 1 or 2 songs on the soundtrack, every song they used, every piece of music they used was actually in one of the Silent Hill games at some point. Also, the person playing Pyramid Head, which from what I can tell from people who remember these games, is the most popular character in the franchise, even more than the main characters. The person playing Pyramid Head in the movie, though, wore 15-inch heels to make him almost 7 foot tall, so that he would actually seem like the monster that was supposed to be the character he was portraying. And a lot of the creatures in the movie were played by professional dancers, so that the people doing the film could actually make sure that the movements of the characters could be done correctly. Also, when Ferlin, who played the daughter in this movie, and 2 other roles as well that had to do with the character, she was 10 years old at the time this movie was done. The writer was actually worried about her so much that he actually apologized to the parents ahead of time, in case that after filming was done, she started to show signs of trauma later on in life from the filming of this. But he actually apologized to them ahead of time because he wanted them to know that he actually did care. One note in the movie is that Dahlia is in no danger. I mean, she's able to walk in both worlds without there being any problems. Well, it turns out this is later revealed that it's because Alessa is the being in control of both worlds, and she still loves her mother. This is later referenced in a quote by the lead character who's playing a mother in the movie, who states that, or at least in my mind, this is where the quote best fits as the reason why. Mother is God in the eyes of a child. So because the daughter loved her still and cared about her, she wouldn't allow any harm to come to her, while she destroyed the town and everybody else in it. No problem. Also, now this one's just a rumor that was given, but Rhoda Mitchell, who plays the mother, Sharon in this movie, who plays the mother of Jodie Roberts' character in this movie was so impressed by Ferlin. Sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing her name, and I'm not meaning to. The ability was impressed by the little girl's ability to play multiple characters in the movie that she decided that this child was her new favorite actress based on this ability. I said, now this one's a rumor because I couldn't find anywhere else where there was an interview or something given where she stated this. Number 5 on my list of good ones to watch, Double Dragon from 1994, a live action one. This one starred Mark Dacascos, who did The Crow, Stairway to Heaven, where he played Eric Draven, and he was also in the movie Only the Strong, which taught capoeira as a fighting style, but it was being taught to kids as a defense mechanism that were in a bad school area. It also starred Scott Wolf, who was in the TV show Perception as a cop, and who many probably know more nowadays from the Nancy Drew TV show that's on the CW, where he plays Carson, where he plays or played, because I haven't watched the series because, sorry, it didn't interest me. But he plays the character of Carson Drew. And also, he was in Lady in the Tramp 2, Scamp's Adventure, where he played Scamp. Those two play the brothers in the movie, the Lee brothers in the movie, while Robert Patrick, who's most notable for his role in Terminator 2 Judgment Day as the T-1000, which was the robot that could actually, like, metal morph, I guess is the best way to phrase it. He could liquidize and change his body easily, but it had a temperature control issue. And then and he was also in the movie The Faculty as the football coach. Well, in this movie, he plays the antagonist for it. And while the story is different from the video game, having it be a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, and the town's actually called New Angeles now because it's like 3 cities put together to make it. But it had better fights in it, and even some comedy moments that you won't get in the game because of how the game was done and how old it was when it came out. Also, Christina Wagner and Alyssa Milano have a fight scene in this movie where they're fighting with each other, and Christina asks the question, now who's the boss? And Alyssa Milano later in the fight states, you're lucky. Generally, I put people in the hospital. To me, this seemed like subtle yet obvious references to the 2 shows that the actresses were in. Alyssa Milano playing the daughter of Tony Danza on the TV show Who's the Boss, and Christina Wagner, who was on, and even still to this day appears occasionally, the ABC's show General Hospital as Felicia Jones. Well, now Felicia Scorpio. And something some people didn't realize for a long time is that on General Hospital, the guy playing her husband on the show, known as Frisco Jones, that's actually her real-life husband. And also, the river they used in the movie that was known for catching fire, in real life, is actually in Ohio, and was known in the past for catching fire many times due to the pollution that was there. So, to me, that seemed kind of like art imitating life in that situation. Now, a rumor I found is that on the first day of shooting, Mark Dacascos, I'm hoping I'm saying his name right, because actually I'm a big fan of his acting ability and his martial arts abilities. He sprained his ankle on the first day of shooting, but didn't tell anybody, and wrapped it himself in his trailer, and still managed to complete the shooting of the film without any problems. Also, there's a scene in the junkyard where where the brothers are confronted by this gang, or by multiple gangs actually. And when their full names are revealed, these are actually references as well. Jimmy Lee, his real name is revealed to be James Stewart Lee. To me, this is a reference to the actor, and many have actually said this is their view also, that it's a reference to the actor James Stewart, known for being in It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, sorry, Vertigo, and also in the 80s or early 90s, there was a film called American Tail, Fievel Goes West. He played the voice of the sheriff, who's a dog in this movie, named Wiley Burke. Obvious play on Wyatt Earp, but it was done nicely. And he actually does the voice for the dog in that movie. And Billy Lee's name is revealed to be William Burroughs Lee. William Burroughs is actually a famous writer. I tried to find some things, but I couldn't find anything that I would know him for or that others might know him for. So basically, you just took their names, made them the long form, and dropped the Lee, and you got who they were referencing. Number 4. Now, while originally I had planned to put this whole thing together, because there's 3 films in this one, but the first 2, but the ones I'm going to discuss now, I decided to separate as they are different. What I'm going to discuss now at number 4 is the Fatal Fury OVAs that came out in 1992 and 1993. The first one that came out in 1992 was called Fatal Fury Garo Denetsu. Oddly enough, the same name that the first Fatal Fury game went by. Or, not the first game, sorry. The first game was just known as Fatal Fury. One of the later games was called Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves. But it actually did talk about Garo Denetsu in one of the games, which translates to Legend of the Hungry Wolf. Now this one actually focused on the story of the first game, though it still took liberties in order to make it into the full OVA form that it had. So yeah, some things were changed, but overall the idea was 2 brothers were seeking revenge against the man who had their father killed. Though in the original story it's that he actually killed him, rather than having him killed. But like I said, the story is actually pretty close. Also, the voice actor for one of the characters, Masaki Satake, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, is a well-known kickboxer in Japan. But to this day, and I even tried looking just to make sure, this is the only voice acting credit that's actually given to this person. And again, I'm not even sure if that's male or female, so if you could help me out there, it'd be helpful. Some places I saw would say that it was he, and others said she, so I'm not sure, but I'm going with the guess that, given that it was the 90s, it was a he. And it's not me trying to be sexist, it's me going off what generally happens with voice acting. They'll get a guy to play the role, and the guy could have been playing a girl, the guy could have been playing just a guy, and this was probably the actor who was actually playing either Geese or Terry or Andy. So it's probably playing a male character. But again, I'm not sure on this, so if you help me out, that'd be nice. The character designer for the series, for the movies, Masami Obari. Again, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the names correctly, and I can't find anywhere they'll tell me how. Actually stated in an interview that they didn't claim any copyright on any aspect of the anime or the OVA except for Terry's chrome-plated hat, which basically was a baseball cap, and it had a big silver plate right in the center where usually you'd find words written, like a team or a symbol or something there. Now, for the 1993 sequel OVA, which was called The New Fighters, this focused on the third game, from what I can tell, where it's more about Wolfgang Krauser, Richard Meyer, those characters in the games as the villains. The character designer from the first one stated that they made Krauser younger in the movie than they did in the games because they wanted Krauser to be seen more as the evil Terry character rather than an Uncle Krauser type figure. They didn't want to make him as old as he was in the games, basically because they wanted somebody that they would think that people could watch and they would see as, oh, hey, this is a matchup that actually makes sense. There's a bonus match, though, that didn't make it to the U.S. version of the film release. But Discotek Media would later release the fight scene the bonus fight in their version of the movies. But it ran into an issue. Since it was never dubbed for English, during this particular scene, it switches from being it switches to Japanese from the English during this scene, and then when the scene's over, it switches back to English. And the fight was between Big Bear and, I want to say the name is Chang Sinzon. Sinzon. Again, not sure if I'm actually pronouncing it right. Also, I'm a big fan, and just to let you all know, I'm a big fan of the Fatal Fury Real Bout King of Fighters series. More of the Fatal Fury and the later editions of the King of Fighters than the Real Bout part, because, and really I don't see why they changed the name, unless a new company took over them at the time. But still, Fatal Fury and the King of Fighters, they actually had stories that made sense to me. The Real Bout was just, hey, let's throw a fighting game together based off of the previous ones. And also, I loved how these, while they didn't focus on the game storyline specifically and as much, they did at least incorporate them into the stories in order to make a good movie out of it. So, like, while you had, in this version of the movie, they had a young boy who was wanting to be a fighter like his hero, Terry Bogard. And he got to meet Terry, and he's like, I want to be like you and be this great fighter. Well, through the film, he comes to realize what it means to be a fighter and the downside to it, as well as the upside. Of idolization, he gets to see the downside of what happens when things go wrong. And how, in order to be a fighter, one of the things you have to do is be the best all the time. Otherwise, just like in any other sport, especially in the game of pool, as was done in a Twilight Zone episode that was redone later on in in the 80s, where they did the story of the best. At pool, what happens on what it takes to be the best and what the catch is to it. This one did that. In the original, it followed the story close enough that it kept the story intact, but it didn't follow it exactly. So people be like, oh, I can watch the movie and see what the game's about and not have to play it. But anyways, it still presented a good story overall. Number 3, I'm going to go back into Tekken, but from 1998, what's listed as Tekken, the motion picture. Depending on where you are, the motion picture might be there, it might not. In the US version, and the reason why is because in Japan and most other countries that had it, they list it as just Tekken, and it's 2 OVAs it's 2 OVAs when it aired instead of one full idea. But when America got a hold of it, instead of having it as two parts, they aired it as 1 hour long special type deal. And so it got the subtitle of The Motion Picture. One thing about this movie is that the end credits during it, they play Offspring's Meaning of Life. When I was a kid, I was trying to figure out what this song was because I actually liked the way it sounded, the heavy rock sound to it. And the lyrics were awesome, and to me, they fit to the movie. And this is another one I actually made a video that's on my YouTube channel called June and Kazuya's Love. But I didn't use The Meaning of Life, I used a Bon Jovi song for it. But The Meaning of Life is a very fitting song to this particular movie, and the idea of the Tekken series. Another song that was featured is the band Stabbing Westward's song, Save Yourself. And for a long time, I didn't realize that that's what the song was until I heard it later on in another thing, and I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I went back and watched the movie and saw it. And heard it being played there, and I was like, that's the song. And then I realized how old the band actually was. Also, what made this one different is that, unlike some of the other things, this one was really loosely based, and it's even admitted that it's loosely based, on the characters in Tekken 2. Not the first game, but the second one. And to me, this is shown in the ending of the movie, and I am going to do a spoiler here, so if you want to, you can skip over this part to where I can go to the point where I'm going to go to my next film. But I'm going to go ahead and reveal this spoiler now. It shows Jin Kazama, Jin Kazama at the end of the movie, and he's with June. Well, the scene, because I actually used to own Tekken 2, and I enjoyed this game and loved it. If you actually finish the little fight thing with June, and you get to the ending, the scene shown at the end of this movie matches her ending almost perfectly, with the exception that it actually has Jin in the scene, in the movie, rather than just some animals and stuff around her in the wood. In the area. Now, number 2 on the list, Fatal Fury, the motion picture. This was the only film listed in the Fatal Fury series of the animated ones that's actually listed as being a motion picture. It had nothing to do with the Fatal Fury Real Bout King of Fighters game storylines, but it had a good story of its own and made it worth watching. In this one, they have the god Artemis, or at least that's what the English name they used was, who was the god of war, had crafted this armor which gave the wearer this crazy amount of power. The story itself actually reminded me of the story of Ares, the Greek god of war. But overall, it was still a good story. But the thing about why it reminded me of Ares is because I could have sworn that when I was a kid I read something about Ares having a thing of armor that was crafted that made the people that served him almost invincible. And when they had it, and the only way that they got rid of it, and the only reason that his army that the people who served him didn't get to conquer, is because the person who was wearing his armor at the time ended up being dismembered and beheaded, and the parts were scattered. Which in the story to Fatal Fury, the motion picture, the pieces were scattered themselves. The pieces were scattered after a while. Once reunited, the god Artemis, as the film called it, would be able to grant the user all of its power again and grant it the full ability. SNK, the people who actually created the Fatal Fury Real Bout King of Fighters franchise, were actually really smart in this movie in that they gave cameos to a number of characters. One of which who isn't even in the Fatal Fury in the franchise itself. They're actually from a different franchise known as Samurai Showdown. Nakoruru, I'm probably saying that wrong, is shown in the movie as being a girl who's dancing in a nightclub. The nightclub happens to be owned by one of the characters from The King of Fighters, known as Duck King. Which, actually, given the way he looks, that was actually an almost dead-on name. And another character that's from the original Fatal Fury games as a villain, and made it into the in the first OVA as a character. I mean, basically he would have been like your Goro type character, where he was the sub boss. His name is Billy Kane. He's an English guy who wore overalls and liked to swing, and his name was fitting because he actually used a cane when he fought. It was his type of martial arts. Another character who makes an appearance is Big Bear, who's a pro wrestler, usually has a mask on, has like a little lightning bolt on it. He goes by the name Raiden or Raiden, I'm not sure, as his alternate name. But when he doesn't have the mask on, he's known as Big Bear. And he actually has a run-in with a female character who becomes a part of the group in this movie that's involved in the storyline of this movie. And another character who makes an appearance is Richard Meyer, who was in the second Fatal Fury OVA, but also in the games as one of the big bosses, or sub-bosses at least. And he appears to be living in the castle that, if you watch the second OVA, belonged to Wolfgang Krauser. He appears to have taken over and started living there. Not sure why they did that, but they did. There's a song performed at the end of this movie in Japanese or in English, depending on which version you want to hear. It's called Oh Angel, and to me this is a very good song that's for inspiration, or if you're like into train, or if you're wanting to train, it's going to be a good one for it. The Japanese version is by Kazukiyo Kiori. I'm probably mispronouncing that, and I apologize, but I'm trying my best to get those right. And the English version is by Warren Stainer. Staner is how I found it online spelled. Not sure if that's actually correct or not. But like I said, the name of the song is Oh Angel, and it's really good. Number one on my list of the good movies that were made from video games, 1995, Mortal Kombat. Starred Christopher Lambert, who is known for playing Connor McLeod in the Highlander movies, who plays in this movie Raiden, the God of Thunder. And Robin Shou, who is known for being in Beverly Hills Ninja with the late Chris Farley, and Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li as Gen. He plays Liu Kang. Something that's interesting about this, he's the only person to appear in both movies, the Street Fighter movie and the Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li and the Mortal Kombat movie. Lyndon Ashby, who many Days of Our Lives fans would remember from 2008 as being Paul Hollingsworth. I didn't watch Days of Our Lives, though. General Hospital fan, I'll be honest. He played, and he's also in, if you've ever seen Van Wilder Freshman Year, which was the third movie in the trilogy, but was a prequel to the original Van Wilder. He plays Van's father in that, but in this movie, Lyndon Ashby played Johnny Cage. Hiroyuki Tagawa, plays the same character he played in Mortal Kombat Legacy TV series and in the Mortal Kombat 11 game. But he was also in the 2011 American series Revenge, and in 2010 he was in Tekken. So actually, he was in all three of the major video game movies in this genre. But anyways, in this particular movie, he plays the villain or antagonist, Shang Tsung. And Bridget Wilson rounds out the cast that we need to know. She was in the movie Love Stinks as the love interest turned into a nightmare. And she was also in Billy Madison as the teacher, love interest of Adam Sandler's character, Billy Madison. In this movie, she would play Sonya Blade, though in the sequel, Annihilation, she would be replaced. Same as Liu Kang would be, not Liu Kang, but Raiden wouldn't be played by Christopher Walken, but by, I forget who it was in the sequel. Also, yeah, now this movie I liked because to me it took the first and second game into account when it made this movie, which is what made it so good. Ed Boon, the co-creator of the original Mortal Kombat, did the voice for Scorpion in this movie. And now, a rumor that went around, because again, I couldn't find anywhere that actually verified this in any way, but I found this on at least one place, but like I said, nowhere else that could verify. Brandon Lee, who most would remember as being the son of Bruce Lee, and in the original movie, The Crow, he played the lead character, Eric Draven. He was originally cast to be Johnny Cage, but he tragically died before production began for this. So that's how Lyndon Ashby actually came to get the role. Jean-Claude Van Damme, who was actually offered the role to be in this movie, turned it down. Because, he's offered the role of Johnny Cage. He was offered the role of Johnny Cage also. But he turned it down in order to do the spectacular failure that was known as the 1994 Street Fighter movie, whose only saving grace was actually the actor who played Bison in it that tragically died not long after the movie was made. But the character in the games was rumored to have been based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, is why they wanted him to do it. Tagawa, who played Shang Tsung, was the filmmaker's first and only choice for the role. Because Tagawa came into the audition dressed in his Shang Tsung costume and read the role while standing in a chair. The only reason the character appears younger in the movies is because they wanted to avoid the excessive makeup that would be necessary in order to duplicate Shang Tsung's look in the video games. And another rumor I found about this movie is that the soundtrack to it went platinum in less than 2 weeks. And I'm sorry, but even I find that one hard to believe, because despite how good the theme for Mortal Kombat is, I don't think it had enough to do. I don't think enough people would have bought it in that short a time. Chris Casamassa, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing again, not on purpose, was hired to do to work as a stunt man on the show, on the movie. But they were, as a stunt ninja for this. But the producers were so impressed with his abilities that he actually got the role to play Scorpion, while Ed Boon did the voice for Scorpion in this. Also, something interesting to note, Kano in the original game and originally in the movie was going to be Japanese American. But Tobias and Boone the creators of the game, were so impressed by the actor Goddard that they retconned the history of Kano and made him Australian. They would later be surprised to learn that Goddard was actually born in England and had given Kano the Australian accent, but Goddard claimed to be Australian, though he was born in England. This actually surprised them a lot to find this out. Kind of surprised me too, because I actually thought the accent was actually authentic with him. Another rumor that came about was that Sean Connery was originally offered the role of Raiden, but he turned it down as he didn't want a physical role at the time. So then they went to Christopher Lambert, who worked on Highlander and Highlander 2 with Sean Connery, and offered him the role. And I think this was actually better casting because Lambert played this role really well and even gave the character of Raiden a bit of a bad attitude and a smart mouth that actually fit in with the character's personality. Now, back to something I was stating earlier. To me, this film took on Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat 2, as the tournament is held in both the Earthrealm for the main part of the tournament, but the final fights in the movie, the final at least 2 fights in the movie, are held in Outworld, which didn't occur until the second game. Katana's appearance didn't happen until the second game. The character of Reptile appeared briefly in the second game as a non-playable character that you could challenge, but he was in his more reptile form, his more true form, as it would later become for the series. The ninja form appears here and there in the first game, but not really seen all that much. In the second one, he's actually fought against if you do certain things. Also, Shao Kahn's brought into it, which didn't occur till the second one. Sonya being captured and held hostage didn't occur till the second one. Even though she wasn't held hostage all that much, if you look when they actually show her in the movie when she's taken to Outworld, she's chained up, and it actually really closely resembles the way she was chained up in the second game when you see her and Kano chained up. Though Kano is dead in the movie, oddly enough, at this time, and she's just being held hostage. But another thing that happens that they show, and that happened in this movie that they didn't show, is that with give me a second here. Sorry, lost my train of thought there for a second. But anyways, something they showed in the movie that they didn't show often in the movie was Liu Kang was actually supposed to do the bicycle kick and stuff during the Sub-Zero fight, but he couldn't do it. And also, when they did the voice for Reptile, it's credited, according to some, as being the guy who plays Shang Tsung having done the voice when it says Reptile. But if you actually listen to it, the voice is too deep and too different sounding to be his. It's more, and which is why it led to the theory that it was actually Shao Kahn, the guy who does Shao Kahn's voice, and what he did. But again, this one was actually really good. So anyways, thanks for listening to my video. Leave a comment about what your favorite or least favorite video game turned movie was and why. And also, as I've stated, leave a comment on what you think I should do an upcoming video on. Because I actually read these comments and look forward so I know what I'm dealing with. Till next time, later.